Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday morning at the sanctuary. I'm your pastor, Mike Robertson. So happy to see you here this morning. Thank you for joining us, taking some time to be here this morning. Another week in the books. How are you? Are you doing all right? You maintaining? Getting enough to eat? Let's not talk about that. You staying cool? Staying calm? You staying sweet? My mom would always say, just be sweet. Be sweet. So I'm trying to be sweet, and that involves ingesting a lot of sweet things. So I think it's helping in one way, but not in another way. But it's an exciting time of the year. Of course, everybody is wondering what's going to happen with schools, and when are we going to be back to having church as normal? I don't know. I don't think there's going to be one particular date when they say, everything is good, everybody go back to normal. I think it's going to be a little series of baby steps. But here around the sanctuary, there's a lot of things going on. Whether or not you're aware of it, TCC, the Tarrytown Children's Center, is starting classes again this Wednesday. And so we met with the teachers last week. They're all excited. They're all getting ready and being mindful of the new preparations that they're going to have in place to have kids, to transfer kids from parents to the school every day. And so be in prayer for them as they begin their year this week. Nobody knows really what's going to happen, but we're taking a step here that we believe will benefit a lot of families who want to get back to normal as much as they can. And so they need a place for their kids to go during the day, during the morning. And we want to provide that if we can. So also around the church, there's a ton of work going on. There's nobody here right now, but boy, there's been people around all week long. The garden area outside by the cottage that was made up of those railroad ties and fencing and had been overgrown and nothing had happened for a year or more, that's all been ripped up. We're going to put that back to lawn, and it's gone. The fencing and everything was taken down remarkably quickly. The railroad ties are still out there, but they'll be going away this week. Also around the bottom of the church, the skirting has all been taken off. Our church is on pier and beam. I don't know if you know that, but because of that, boy, we've had lots of critter problems. Very many times there have been large animals crawling in the ceiling above my office, and it's a little disconcerting. Well, we're going to repair all that skirting, fix where the creatures were coming in. There's been work going on the playgrounds this week. Just a lot of activity. So things are happening. We're still getting contractor bids for the bathroom renovations, but that's going to take place real soon. And we're looking forward to that as well. So let's see. I think that's all I need to tell you about. Just continue to pray for our church. Continue to support it by being here, by showing up on Wednesday nights at our Zoom chat. We appreciate you always being a part of the things that we are doing. Oh, one more thing to announce. Next Sunday, following the message, we'll have a special called business conference via Zoom. And the purpose of this conference is to approve our church budget for 2020, 2021. And this is the best way we have to do it right now is via Zoom. So we'll be presenting the budget to you. Our treasurer will be sharing with you some of the details from it. And we'll be taking questions if you have questions. But hopefully you will make quick work of this. Our council has put in some time going over every item in the budget and adjusting, eliminating, lowering, raising, whatever was required. And so I hope that you will be grateful for their work and will ratify their decision. All right. And that will happen right after the meeting here. We'll switch from YouTube to Zoom, and it'll take a couple of minutes to switch over. But then we'll be able to see all of you, and you'll be able to ask questions or whatever you would like. Okay, I think that's it now. Let's get to the topic today. The title of this message is The Comfy Chair. You know, when I first started getting the opportunity to speak on Sunday mornings, I was not the pastor of the church. I was just an employee of the church, and I got to fill in for the pastor one Sunday, and it went well, and so I sort of became the go-to substitute for the pastor. And I noticed after several times I had spoken, people would always say, not always, but a lot of people would say something very similar. They would say, "Hey, Mike, I really enjoyed your sermon." Well, I guess it wasn't really a sermon, but we enjoyed it. And I thought, wait a minute, not really a sermon. It seemed like a sermon to me. And I thought, why would somebody say it wasn't really a sermon? Was it not theological enough? Did it not have enough Jesus in it? Was it not serious enough? Am I not a serious enough pastor? I don't know. But I realized eventually what my gift is, and that is I am a storyteller. And so I almost always begin a message with a story. And I know that some pastors don't do that. Some preachers don't do that. They get right to the theology part. But I think there's a reason for telling stories. There's certainly a reason I tell stories. You look at the New Testament and you see Jesus traveling around with his 12 disciples, and they came up to him one day and asked him the question. They said, "Why do you tell all these stories? The Good Samaritan, the prodigal son. Why do you tell all these stories?" See, they didn't think it was a sermon either. They, I don't know what they thought the Sermon on the Mount was, the stories on the hillside or something like that. But Jesus heard this question, said, "Why do you tell stories?" And he said this. He said, "Look, you've been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works. Not everybody has this gift, this insight. It has not been given to them. That's why I tell stories, to create readiness, to nudge the people toward receptive insight." And folks, if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. So having said that, let me tell you a story. Years ago, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, Lisa and I decided we wanted some new chairs for the living room. The chairs that we sit in when we watch TV, when we eat most nights. We wanted some new chairs. And you spend a lot of time in your chair. And so we started looking around at furniture stores. Couldn't really find anything that we liked. I think in my mind, I was thinking of a big overstuffed throne-like chair, with big arms where I could sit there and say, "Fetch me my bluebell." And we couldn't find anything that we liked. And then one day we went into a store on Burnett Road, and I saw this chair. And I said, "Well, that's interesting, but it looks like an office chair." And the sales guy said, "Oh, no, feel it." And so I walked over and I touched it. Oh boy, it was leather. And it was not just leather. It was the softest leather, like butter. Yeah, I never felt anything that felt so luxurious as that. He said, "See, the headrest, you can adjust. You can move it forward, backwards." And I thought, okay, that's a nice thing. If you want to relax more, you can move it a certain way, whatever. And he said, "Sit down in it." I sat down in the chair. He said, "You see, it swivels. Swivels from side to side. Great. I'm liking this chair a lot." And then he said, "If you reach down on this side and pull this little handle, it also rocks." Great. He said, "Put your feet up on the footstool." I put my feet on the footstool. It rocked too. Well, by this time, I'm already reaching for my checkbook in my mind. And then he says, "Oh, and if you pull this switch right here, it leans all the way back down. It reclines all the way flat." Well, it had everything except a maybe built-in refrigerator and a remote control for the TV, but it had everything. And that guy sold 2 chairs to the Robertson family that day. We still got them. I was sitting in mine this morning before I came here to the church. A chair is important. That chair is extremely comfortable. But I've come to know something about my comfy chair. It's great for eating ice cream. It's great for playing video games or watching movies or reading a book. It's great for that. But when I'm sitting in that comfy chair, I'm not much good for anybody else. I'm just a lump at that point. I meld with my chair and we become one sometimes, it feels like. I'm not any good to anybody else when I'm seated in that chair. It reminds me, as many things do, of Monty Python. Now, I know Monty Python, you either love them or you hate them. I love them. And they have a sketch that some of you may remember called the Spanish Inquisition sketch. And the show is proceeding with normal sketches set in modern times. And two people will be talking, and one of them says, well, what's this picture here? And she will say, oh, that's a picture of the Spanish Inquisition. The other person will say, oh, I didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition. And the door will burst open, and these three cardinals will bust in, and one of them will say, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. And it happens throughout the program. It doesn't have anything to do with the sketch that's going on. They just burst in and always say, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Well, there's a scene in here where one of the people who says, oh, I didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition. One of the people in that sketch is a cute little older lady. And they burst in and they say, you are charged with heresy. How do you plead? And she says, well, I don't know. What am I accused of? And I say, you're accused of heresy by thought and by deed. How do you plead? And she doesn't know what to say. She's just bewildered. These strange people have burst into her room. And so the head cardinal says, you will confess under pain of torture. Fetch the soft pillows. And the other two guys come in, and they got these soft cushions, and they just start poking her with the cushions. Well, she's just giggling. It's tickling her. And then the cardinal says, well, she is made of sterner stuff. Get me the comfy chair. And there's this big orchestral sting, and everybody goes, not the comfy chair, not the comfy chair. And they bring in this overstuffed armchair, and this cute little old lady sits down in the armchair and just snuggles down in it. And they keep saying, confess, confess. Well, she's perfectly content to just sit there in her comfy chair. And here's the lesson from Monty Python. That comfy chair doesn't motivate you to do anything except to stay comfortable. We just want to stay in our comfortable chair. But let me contrast this chair with this chair. How much time have you spent on one of these? Oh, not just all those Sundays throughout your life, but sometimes Wednesday nights. Sometimes if you went to a revival meeting, sometimes every night of the week. But how many weddings, how many funerals, how many baptisms? How many of you sat on one of these and just prayed your heart out and wept because of an issue you were having? How many of you sat on one of these and then realized, I want to be a follower of Jesus Christ? I sat in one of these and learned that I was supposed to be a pastor. And so sitting on one of these was the first step toward me standing right here today. Amazing things happen in these seats, but hardly anything amazing ever happens in these because they're too comfortable. This chair here is not nearly as comfortable as this leather one. But you know what, folks? We are not called to be comfortable. Jesus did not say, hey, come and follow me. Take it easy. Put your feet up. Lean back. Rock. Recline. Swivel. Instead, Jesus was always taking people out of their comfort zone. Remember the story where Peter and James and John go up on top of a mountain with Jesus because he needs to pray. And he begins to pray on top of this mountain, and all of a sudden they see Elijah and Moses appear on the mountain, and Elijah and Moses begin to converse with Jesus. Now, I'm no fan of committee meetings, but that's one meeting I would love to have heard what was discussed. Imagine Jesus, Moses, Elijah talking to each other. And as Jesus talks to these two great patriarchs of our faith, he actually begins to change physically. His face begins to shine. His clothing begins to glow. I don't know I can't imagine what that looked like. But it was so amazing and so exciting that Peter says, hey, let's just live up here. I'll build 3 houses, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. We'll just stay right up here on the mountaintop. I know that feeling. I've had mountaintop experiences in my life and thought, why can't it be like this all the time? But Jesus was not about staying where it was comfy. You remember Jesus is known for giving what we call the Great Commission, but before the Great Commission, there was another commission that Monty Python might call the not-so-great commission, or the perfectly okay commission in Matthew chapter 10, and he sends out the disciples in pairs, sends them out 2 by 2 to tell about the kingdom of God that they have learned about from Jesus. And before they leave, he gives them these words of advice. He says, don't think you have to put on a fundraising campaign before you start. You don't need a lot of equipment. You are the equipment. All you need to keep that going is 3 meals a day. Travel light. And he goes on and says, when you enter a town or a village, don't insist on staying in a luxury inn. Get a modest place with some modest people and be content there until you leave. When I read this, I was reminded of a video I saw a couple of years ago. You can probably still find it. It was 2 televangelists having a discussion on camera, telling exactly why they both felt they really needed a $52 million private jet. Well, we just can't minister effectively unless we can travel in this style and be free from the things that are going to distract us from our ministry. We need a $52 million private jet to minister effectively. Really? Really? What do you think Jesus would say about that? Jesus didn't say, go out and be comfortable. He just said, go. Go. Stop sitting there being comfortable and go. Jesus is about getting us out of our comfort zone. And I got to tell you, I'm not comfortable conversing with a homeless person who may have mental issues, who may have irritating habits. I'm not comfortable sitting and listening to a distraught person pour out their heart to me. It can make me very uncomfortable. I'm not comfortable hugging somebody for whom hygiene is a rumor at best. I'm not comfortable with giving away my stuff. But all of that is exactly what I am called to do. And you are called to do that as well. Now, I know the natural thing is for us to say, well, what about my comfort? If I'm going to go out and comfort people, who's going to comfort me? Remember in old Peanuts comics, Lucy would say, if we're all supposed to be here to help each other, who's helping me? I know that feeling too. But when Jesus gave that great commission, he also made a promise. He said, I'm going to send you something, a comforter in the person of the Holy Spirit. See, Jesus had this interestingly bizarre logic. He would say things like, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. He would say, if you want to be exalted, you got to humble yourself. He would say, you want to be comfortable? Go comfort somebody else. We are not called to be comfortable. We are called to comfort others. One of my heroes in life is a renegade Baptist preacher named Will D. Campbell. Will Campbell was a pastor in Mississippi in the early 60s at the height of the civil rights movement, when it was really taking off and the fight against segregation was getting very hot. And he was one of the few white pastors who spoke out, and he said he came to know that God loved black people as much as he loved white people. That was a radical thought then in the South. Unfortunately, it still seems to be a radical thought to some folks who have not got the message even in the past 50 or 60 years. And so you can see pictures of Will Campbell marching next to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right next to him. He'll be one of the only white faces in the group. He became very close with the leadership of the civil rights movement because he believed he had to be an example and show that God loved everyone. And so he became very notorious, very well known with this movement. He had threats against his life. He had rocks thrown through his window. Somebody dropped a bomb outside of his house. And he went through all that because he believed this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And he became more and more prominent. He became more and more comfortable with this role, ministering to African American people. But just as he was getting comfortable, he had a very uncomfortable thought. He woke up one morning and God had said to him, Will, you're right. I love black people as much as I love white people. But God said, you know what? I also love those guys in the hoods, those guys in the Ku Klux Klan outfits as much as I love you. Now, you want to talk about a radical notion. Probably just lost several of you right there. God told Will Campbell, who's ministering to those guys, these white supremacists? Who's telling them about love instead of hate? And Will Campbell, who had become such a trusted aide to the civil rights movement, went to the other side of the street and began to minister and spend time with people who were calling for lynch mobs, who were preaching hatred. Wow. That's an amazing example of what he would do to follow his instructions from God. It's an amazing inspirational life. If you want to study something interesting, read about Will D. Campbell's life. But he later said he had an idea about the invitation hymn. He was a Baptist preacher. And at the end of the service in a Baptist church, most of you know, they would sing 12 verses of Just As I Am, and the preacher would stand there waiting for people to come down the aisle to meet Jesus. Because apparently this is where Jesus lives, right here at the top of the aisle by the communion table. But Will Campbell said one day, I have a new idea about the invitation. I have a new vision about that invitation hymn. It's the end of the service, and they start playing the music, and people start coming down the aisle. And the preacher says, wait, don't come down here. Don't come to me. Go to Jesus. And he points toward the back door. And the people begin to turn and go out. And he said, then about 30 minutes later, the phone rings at the police station. It's the hospital. And they say, there's 100 people in the lobby of the hospital, and they all say they want to come visit with Jesus. We don't have Jesus here. All we have is a bunch of sick people. And then he gets a call from the prison, and the warden says, there's all kinds of people showing up here saying they want to come and give a visit to Jesus. And we don't have Jesus, we just have a bunch of worthless criminals. And the nursing home calls and says, we've got dozens of people who want to spend some time caring and communing with Jesus. And I keep telling them, all we have is a bunch of sick old people. Well, you get the message? Will Campbell was saying, Jesus is not in here. Jesus is out there. It's the same thing that Jesus said. If you want to do something nice for me, go do something nice for someone else who needs it. Now, look, we got a little paradox going right now. This is unprecedented, certainly in my ministry, because right now, chances are really good, you're sitting in your comfy chair and you're at church at the same time. We never had that happen before. But you can sit there and say, okay, I'm in church. I've done my duty for the week. You're probably not in much of a mind to go anywhere. And that's what makes this such a tough, interesting time. I just have to remind all of us, myself included, that Jesus, both of his commissions, his two commissions, were based on the word go. Well, does that mean I forsake my comfort to help somebody else? Yeah, that's what Jesus says. Does that mean I let somebody come in and sit in my soft leather, swiveling, reclining, rocking chair with footstool? Yeah. Seats here in the church are not very comfortable, and I think that's probably a good thing because we're not supposed to end up here. This is the starting place. Jesus intends for us to not live in the church, but to go into the world and take the church out there. Maybe that's not a sermon, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. My message is to get out of this building, but also to get out of the building you're in. You're going to have to be really creative right now to find ways to help other people while you're sitting at home, but it's not impossible. There are people doing it. There are people finding new ways to give, to be involved, to support, to reach out, to talk to people, to love people. And some of that can even be done without leaving the house. We can go without having to take a step sometimes. The church is not in here. It is out there. Thank you for being here this morning. I love each and every one of you. God bless you till next time we get together. Bye-bye.